I got married on the most beautiful Saturday in October. By midnight, I was a widow. My husband collapsed on our wedding night, right there in our hotel suite, surrounded by rose petals and champagne. He was 31 years old. The doctors said it was a heart attack. His family said it was fate. I said nothing because I was in shock. But exactly 7 days later, a stranger knocked on my door, and everything I thought I knew about that night turned into the most devastating lie I've ever been handed. My name is Megan. I'm 28 years old, and what you're about to hear is the truth. Every horrible, heartbreaking, shocking word of it. Before I keep going, if someone you loved turned out to be a complete stranger to you, what would you do? Would you want the truth, even if it destroyed you? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. I share real stories, real emotions, real people. You don't want to miss what comes next in this one. Okay, let's go back to that night. My name is Megan, and I need you to understand something before I tell you this story. I am not a dramatic person. I have never been the kind of woman who cries at movies or falls apart at the first sign of trouble. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the second of 3 kids in a house where my dad worked double shifts at a factory and my mom taught second grade. We didn't have much, but we had love, the honest, unglamorous kind. Dinner at the table every night, church on Sunday, no big secrets. That upbringing gave me a kind of stability I always carried into my adult life. I graduated college with a degree in communications, moved to Nashville at 23, and spent the next 5 years building something I was quietly proud of. I had a good job at a marketing firm. I had a small apartment with a balcony that overlooked a little park. I had 2 best friends I'd known since college, Danny and Priya, who would show up at my door with wine and no warning, and I would never once complain about it. By 27, I had a good life, a real one. And then I met Daniel. He came into my life the way good things sometimes do, quietly, through a side door. We met at a friend's birthday dinner. He was sitting at the far end of the table, laughing at something, and I remember thinking he had the kind of laugh that sounds like it means something, genuine, deep, the kind that comes from the stomach. We talked for 3 hours that night about music, about travel, about our families. He was from Charlotte originally, 30 years old. He worked in construction project management, which I always thought sounded noble in some way, building things that last. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and these warm hazel eyes that looked at you like you were the only person in the room. I know that sounds like the beginning of every love story ever told, but that's the thing about real love. It really does feel like a cliche when you're inside it, because those cliches exist for a reason. Daniel called me 2 days later. We went for coffee, then dinner, then a weekend trip to Asheville 4 months in, where we hiked a trail in the rain and ate at a tiny Italian restaurant, and he held my hand across the table and said, "I think I've been waiting for you without knowing it." I cried in the car on the way home. Not because I was sad, because I had never in my life felt so completely, precisely seen by another person. We dated for 14 months. He proposed on a Tuesday in March in my apartment with no photographers and no grand gesture, just him on one knee in my kitchen holding a ring his grandmother had left him. And he said the most beautiful, simple thing, "Megan, I just want to do everything with you. Will you let me?" I said yes before he even finished the sentence. The next 8 months were what I now call the best months of my life. We planned a wedding, a real one, Not over the top, but personal. The ceremony was at a vineyard outside Nashville, 64 guests, my sister as maid of honor, his best friend, Marcus, as best man, simple white flowers, strung lights, October sky. I want you to hold that image for a second, because I need you to understand what I was walking into that day. I was happy. I was so completely bone deep happy. I remember getting into the car to drive to the venue and thinking, I've done it. I've actually done it. I've built the kind of life I dreamed about as a little girl. The ceremony was perfect, every single moment of it. I walked down that aisle toward Daniel, and he was crying before I even reached him. My dad squeezed my hand at the altar. My mom was a mess in the front row. And when Daniel said his vows, he had written them himself, I felt like the whole world had arranged itself into something right. We danced, we laughed, we took 1,000 pictures. Daniel spun me around on the dance floor at midnight and kissed me in front of everyone, and the whole room cheered. At 12:45 in the morning, we left for our hotel. By 1:30, he was dead. I want to slow down here because I need to walk you through the next few hours carefully, because this is where, looking back, everything starts to crack. We got to the hotel, which was a beautiful old place downtown. We had a suite on the 14th floor. I remember the elevator ride up, both of us exhausted and giddy and a little bit drunk on champagne and happiness. He was quiet in the elevator. I remember thinking he seemed tired, but that made sense. We both were. We got into the room. I went to the bathroom to freshen up. It couldn't have been more than 10 minutes. When I came back out, Daniel was sitting on the edge of the bed. He had his head in his hands. I said, "Hey, you okay?" He looked up at me, and I saw something on his face I had never seen before. It wasn't pain exactly. It was more like grief, like someone who had just been told something they didn't want to hear. He said, "Megan, I need to tell you something." Those 6 words. Those 6 words changed everything. But he never got to finish the sentence. He gasped, just once. Then he fell forward off the bed and hit the floor. I screamed. I don't remember making the decision to scream. It just came out of my body, this wild animal sound that I didn't recognize as my own voice. I ran to him. I called 911. I did compressions the way they'd taught us in a CPR class I'd taken 5 years earlier and had never thought about since. I kept going until the paramedics came through the door, and even then I had to be pulled away. He was pronounced dead at the hospital at 2:17 in the morning. Cardiac arrest, they said. Sudden onset. Sometimes it happens even in young, healthy people. There was no way to predict it. There was nothing anyone could have done. I sat in that hospital waiting room in my wedding dress alone for 4 hours before his family arrived. I don't have the words for what that felt like. I don't think those words exist. The days that followed were a kind of fog I still can't fully describe. People kept coming to my apartment, his family, my family, friends, colleagues. There was food everywhere, flowers, cards. Everyone said the right things, and none of it touched me because I was somewhere else entirely. I was stuck in that hotel room on my knees, pressing my hands against a chest that wouldn't move. There were things, though, that I noticed through the fog. Small things that didn't quite add up. Daniel's parents, his mother Carol and his stepfather Robert, they were devastated, of course, but there was something else in Carol's face when she looked at me. Something behind the grief. Something guarded. When I tried to hug her at the hospital, she went stiff. She said all the right things, but her eyes didn't match her words. Marcus, his best friend and closest friend, he barely came around at all. He showed up once, the day after, for about 20 minutes. He held my hand, said he was so sorry, and then he left. He wouldn't look me in the eye. I noticed. But I told myself I was imagining things. Grief does strange things to your perception. I was wrong. I wasn't imagining anything. 7 days after the wedding, I had barely slept. I hadn't eaten a real meal in 4 days. My best friend Danny was staying with me, sleeping on my couch because I couldn't be alone at night. I would lie in bed and stare at the ceiling and replay every moment of that last evening, every word, every look. Megan, I need to tell you something. What? What did you need to tell me, Daniel? What was so important, so heavy, that it put that look on your face on your wedding night? At 10 in the morning on that 7th day, my doorbell rang. Danny answered it. She came back to the bedroom with a strange look on her face. "There's a woman here," she said. "She says she knows Daniel." I went to the door. She was maybe 35, dark-haired, very pretty in a quiet way. She had a toddler on her hip, a little boy, maybe 2 years old, with dark hair and hazel eyes. Hazel eyes. The exact same hazel eyes I had spent 14 months falling in love with. I gripped the doorframe. She looked at me and her face crumpled. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I didn't know where else to go. My name is Renata, and this is Eli. Eli is Daniel's son." I'll be honest with you. My first instinct was that she was lying. My second instinct was to close the door. My third instinct, the one that won, was that somewhere in my body I already knew she was telling the truth. I let her in. She sat at my kitchen table, holding her son on her lap, and she told me everything. And I mean everything. She and Daniel had been together for almost 4 years before he met me. They were never officially engaged, but they had been building a life together. When she got pregnant with Eli, Daniel had panicked. He told her he needed space to figure things out. He pulled away, he stopped coming around, and then, 6 months after Eli was born, he simply stopped calling. She tried to reach him, he blocked her number. She reached out through mutual friends, he told them she was unstable. She was left alone, with an infant, and a story that no one seemed to believe. And then, 8 months ago, she got a notification on Facebook. One of their old mutual friends had tagged Daniel in a post. "Congratulations to Daniel and his beautiful bride-to-be." She saw my face. She saw the ring. She had been trying to figure out what to do ever since. She had almost reached out before the wedding. She had typed and deleted a message to me 100 times. She had driven to the venue the day before the ceremony and sat in the parking lot for 30 minutes and then driven away because she didn't know what to say, or if anyone would believe her, or if she had any right to destroy what looked like someone's happiness. And then Daniel died, and she saw the announcement online, and she waited a full week, because she was trying to decide if any of this even mattered now. But she had Eli to think about. She had a son who deserved to have his father's family know he existed. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she told me. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "I'm not angry at you. You didn't know. I could tell from everything Daniel ever said that he was very good at being a different person to different people." I stared at her son, at those eyes. I thought about Daniel on the edge of the bed. "Megan, I need to tell you something." He had known. He had known she was going to come forward. Maybe she had contacted him. Maybe he had finally decided to come clean. Maybe the weight of it had become too much on the one night he couldn't lie anymore. He had about to tell me, and then his heart gave out. After Renata left, I sat in my kitchen alone for a long time. Danny gave me space. I needed it. I went through everything. Every memory. I thought about every trip we took, every weekend I didn't hear from him, every time he stepped outside to take a phone call. There had been moments, small, easy-to-dismiss moments that I had never given a second thought. Inconsistencies I had chalked up to stress or introversion or just the natural privacy of a grown man. How many of those moments had been about Eli, about Renata, about the life he was hiding 3 states away? I called Marcus. He picked up on the second ring and immediately said, "Megan, oh God, Megan," which told me everything. "You knew," I said. He didn't answer for a long moment, then quietly, "Yes." It came out slowly, all of it. Marcus had known about Renata and Eli from the beginning. He was there the night Daniel found out she was pregnant. He had watched Daniel make the decision, consciously, deliberately, to step away from them. He had disagreed with it. They had fought about it badly, more than once. When Daniel met me and started getting serious, Marcus had pushed him to come clean. He had said more than once that I deserved to know, that Eli deserved better, that Daniel was building a life on sand. But Daniel had always had an answer. He loved me, he didn't want to lose me, he was going to handle it. He would tell me when the time was right. There was never a right time. And Marcus, out of loyalty, out of cowardice, out of some awful combination of both, had stayed quiet. "He was my best friend," Marcus said. "I know that's not an excuse. I've hated myself for it." "You stood at that altar. You watched me marry a man who had a secret child." "I know." "You watched me make vows to a man who had a secret child." "I know." His voice broke. "I'm sorry, Megan. I'm so sorry." I hung up. There was one more call I had to make. Carol. Daniel's mother knew too. That one I hadn't been certain of, but it turns out Carol had met Eli once, just once, about a year before Daniel and I started dating. Daniel had brought the baby to Charlotte for a weekend, whether out of guilt or some impulse towards decency, I don't know. Carol had held her grandson. She had looked at her son and told him he needed to do right by that baby. He had promised her he would. And then he hadn't. And Carol, who loved her son more than her own integrity, had chosen not to push. "I thought once you two got married, he would settle down. He would find a way to bring Eli into the picture gradually." "Gradually?" I repeated. "I didn't think it was my place." "He was my husband, Carol, for 9 hours. He was my husband for 9 hours, and he had a son I didn't know about. And you were at my wedding." She had no answer for that. Neither did I. The hardest part wasn't the anger, honestly. The anger was almost clean. It had edges. It had direction. It gave me something to do. The hardest part was the grief, because I was grieving 2 things at once: a man I loved completely and a man who never fully existed. I was mourning a Daniel who turned out to be at least partly a fiction, and you can't separate those 2 griefs. They live in the same room. You can't mourn the real love without also mourning the lie. I took 3 weeks off work. I started seeing a therapist, a woman named Dr. Barnes, who had kind eyes and very direct questions. She helped me understand that what I was experiencing wasn't just heartbreak and loss. It was a betrayal so layered that it would take time to even fully see the shape of it. She helped me stop trying to make sense of Daniel as if he were a puzzle to be solved. "Some people," she said, "are contradictions you never fully resolve. You just decide how much space to give them in your life going forward." That was hard to hear, but it was right. About a month later, I reached out to Renata, not because I owed her anything, but in some strange way, I felt connected to her in a way I couldn't ignore. We were both Daniel's victims. We had both loved versions of him. And she had a child, a real, innocent child who deserved not to be caught in the middle of the wreckage. We met for coffee. It was awkward, deeply, almost unbearably awkward, but she was a decent person. She wasn't trying to insert herself into my life. She was just trying to figure out how to move forward, same as me. I told her what I knew about Daniel's finances. I knew he had a life insurance policy. We had set it up together as part of our pre-wedding financial planning. I reached out to the attorney who was handling his estate. I told him about Eli. I told him about Renata. Daniel had never updated his beneficiary paperwork to include his son. Eli had no legal protection. That wasn't something I was willing to let stand. I waived my own claim on the life insurance. I want to say that was a noble thing, but honestly, it wasn't nobility. It was clarity. That money felt contaminated to me. I didn't want it. And Eli, that little boy with his father's eyes, had done nothing wrong. The attorney facilitated everything. It was not clean or quick. There were legal processes, there were documents. Carol initially pushed back, briefly, bitterly, before her attorney apparently explained that she had no standing and that fighting me on this would be both costly and futile. She backed down. Marcus reached out again, several times. He wanted to apologize in person. For a long time, I didn't respond. Eventually, I agreed to meet him. I sat across from him at a diner and I let him talk. He cried. He said he'd been carrying it for so long. He said he didn't know how to live with it. I told him the truth. You made a choice every single day for over a year, and you have to live with that. I can't take that from you or give it back to you. I didn't forgive him that day. Maybe I will someday. That's a decision I'm leaving on a shelf for now. It has been 11 months since that Saturday in October. I moved out of my apartment. Not because I couldn't afford it or because I had to, but because I needed different walls. I found a place a few miles away, smaller but with better light. I have a plant now. Several, actually. I never used to be a plant person. I went back to work. I started running again. I started calling my mom more. I started appreciating the size and weight of ordinary Tuesday evenings, dinner, a show, my cat on my lap, in a way I never had before. Because now I understand that the ordinary is actually the extraordinary. It's what most of us are protecting even when we don't know it. I think about Daniel. Not always with anger, not always with grief. Sometimes just with this deep, exhausted sadness for the man he could have been if he'd been braver. He wasn't a monster. He was weak and afraid and selfish, and those qualities, when you choose to act on them day after day in big ways and small, can cause enormous damage to people who trusted you with their whole hearts. I think about Eli sometimes. I hope he grows up knowing his father's family. I hope he grows up knowing he was wanted, even if the circumstances of his beginning were complicated. Children don't choose the stories they're born into. Someone asked me recently if I regret loving Daniel, if I wish I had never met him, if I could go back and choose differently. And the honest answer, the one that surprised even me, is no. Because even the version of Daniel I knew, the one that loved me, the one who said, "I just want to do everything with you," in my kitchen on a Tuesday night, that love was real. The feelings were real. My feelings were real. And I don't think real love, even when it's built on an incomplete foundation, is something to regret. It taught me what I want. It taught me what I will not accept. It showed me that I am capable of loving someone completely and surviving the loss of them and rebuilding myself on the other side. That's not nothing. That's actually a lot. I started writing about it. Not publicly, not yet. Just for myself. Pages and pages of it. Dr. Barnes encouraged it. She said it was a way of making the experience mine, of reclaiming the story from all the people who tried to manage it and hide it and contain it. This story is mine, not Daniel's, not Carol's, not Marcus's. Mine. And I'm still writing it. If you're watching this and you've been through something that broke you open like this, a betrayal, a loss, a lie that rewrote your past, I want you to know one thing. You are allowed to feel all of it. The grief and the anger and the love and the fury and the strange, tender sadness that comes when you realize someone was never quite who you thought they were. You don't have to choose just one feeling. You don't have to be tidy. You just have to keep moving toward the light, toward the truth, toward the version of yourself who knows better now. I'm still getting there, but I'm getting there. My name is Megan. I was a widow at 28, and I'm still here. Thank you for listening.